Welcome to the Happy Investor Method Show. I am your host, Angela E. Matthews. Well, folks, we are in for one heck of a ride, and here is the reason why. Today, we're going to talk about the power of compound investing. Now, for some of us, this is a term that we just have no idea what it means, honestly. And if it happens to be you, don't worry, that's totally fine. When you think about interest rates and investing, if you're the person who gets kind of icky and weird, well, you are in for a treat because I am going to show you how to make compound investing and interest rates your best friend. And guess what? I am going to do it in less time than it takes to actually cook lunch. So let's hop right on in. So really, what I want to base this conversation on is something that my father told me years ago, which was after he had gotten laid off from his job. It was the simple notion that if we had invested in just one stock from the day you were born, we would be extremely wealthy and your life would be different. Now, at the time, I thought that he was crazy. Maybe he was going through a quarter life crisis. And I thought, really, one stock? And at this time, I hadn't invested in the stock market at all. Didn't even know that you could, honestly, by yourself. But I thought about what he said and I started doing some research. And I thought, well, what if we invested in, say, Apple? And of course, there were other companies that we could have invested in as well. I don't want to say that there aren't. But what if we invested in something around us? My sister at the time was in college. They bought her a Macintosh computer, which is pretty much like the granddaddy of a modern day Apple or a MacBook Air or Apple product. And what if they just continuously invested in it? Now, the reason why I want to talk to you about this is because so many times we think, one day we're going to start investing. One day we're going to take this serious. We're just going to continuously go on the hustle and the grind and make our own money. But you know what? That is not going to cut it if you want to actually retire one day on an island, or even if you want to just take time off to do whatever you want and just stop working, right? And so we have to start thinking about, what are we going to do when we don't want to do anything? This is the question I have for you. Now, if you have a business or if you are thinking that, hey, I'm going to climb up the corporate ladder, there's nothing wrong with that. However, like I said, what are you going to do when you don't want to do anything? Your money should be working for you. So I did the hard task of running the numbers. And honestly, it wasn't that hard. It was a bit of internet research and a bit of calculations, but honestly, the computer did it all. And I wanted to see, what if we had invested in Apple within the last 10 years? Now, of course, my dad, since the time I was born, would be the goal. But guess what? Realistically speaking, where were we all 20, 25, 30 years ago? And so I wanted to bring something closer home. So I want you to think, where were you 10 years ago, right? 10 years ago, life was probably okay. It was probably going good. You are probably doing a lot of what you used to do right now, right? Which is, planning vacation travel or celebrating good moments with family. Perhaps you had just gotten a promotion. Perhaps you had just saved up a certain amount of money that you've never saved up before. All of these things were happening, say, 10 years ago, and a lot of them are still here. But at the same time, I want you to think about what has changed in 10 years. What technologies have happened, what relationships have ended. I know for me, I'm not in the same relationship that I was in 10 years ago. My father had passed away since 10 years ago. I'm not even living in the same state from 10 years ago. And honestly, I've probably traveled to about an additional 15 countries since 10 years ago. And so much has changed in 10 years. But the one thing that I'm so happy has changed is my net worth, and it continues to grow. And so I'm going to show you what it would be like to manage your money, say 10 years ago, so that you can have an idea of what it would have been like now, so that as we start investing and talking about the conversation of wealth, you don't just consume it, but you actually take action. You need to take action. And I'm going to be pushing for you to take action, because you can consume all the information that you want. You can listen to every single episode, and trust me, I will love you for it. But I'm not going to be happy until I see some change in your account, in your bank account, in your investment account. So let's go. Ready? All right. So we've got 10 years. 10 years ago, Apple came out with probably one of its most iconic products. And one of the products that you probably don't even remember it anymore because it became obsolete was the iPod. Do you remember the iPod? It was simply, an MP3 player that you can put all these songs on. And at the time, everyone had all these CDs, like these huge CD collections, as big as like this wall behind me would be lined with CDs. And if you wanted to listen to something, you would have to go and look through your CDs or open up this huge album, pull the CD out, wipe it clean, slide it in the CD player. And if you wanted to get to a certain track, you'd have to look on the back of the sleeve to see what number was the track that you were looking for and fast forward to it, and all this production, right? Just to listen to a song. But we didn't mind it because guess what? We had record players before that. So we thought this was advancement. Then Apple comes out with the iPod. Now they weren't the first. But guess what, y'all? They were the best at marketing. And this is why I love the idea of marketing. And anytime I invest in a company, I see how are they marketing themselves? And the reason why is because if you don't market yourself to stand out of the crowd from everyone else, guess what? You're not going to succeed. And so I need companies that I invest in to succeed. So all this to say, Apple came out with this great campaign. Everyone else, like Samsung, Sony, all these other companies were saying, oh, it's going to be 32 megabytes and the battery will last this long. And they were saying all these technical things that the average person had no idea what the hell they were talking about. This might be you if you actually turn on the TV or the radio station to MSNBC, and they're just talking about the Dow Jones did this and the equity, the Dow Jones did that, and the PE ratio is this, and this is the dip, and if you're going to short this, or if you're going to, take a long position on this, you might be thinking, what the heck are you saying? Which is why I'm happy you're listening to the show, because I'm going to be breaking all that stuff down for you. However, Apple, back to the story, you know what they said? They said, hey, we are going to give you 550 songs in your pocket. And when you think about that, you think, wait, 550 songs, like how many CDs would that be? And I think at the time it was actually more based on the storage you got. And so I think it was like up to 1,000 or something songs in your pocket. And to wrap your head around this mentally was like, how is this even possible? But really and truly, you didn't care how it was possible. You didn't care what megabytes they had. You didn't care what the device really looked like. All you cared was that you got so much songs in your pocket. And that's kind of the company that I need you to start thinking about when you think about companies. How are they preparing for the future? How are they breaking it down that simply? And so for me, I love that we're going to use Apple today as our case study, because so many folks are thinking, well, that's a no-brainer using Apple. However, Apple has gone through so many curves within their business model that I feel confident in using them as a case study because they're a company that knows how to pivot and adjust. So let's think back. 2010, we were all hanging out, probably listening to, some really good music. Everyone was getting excited. The recession was over. Things were on the bright side and things were looking pretty good. So let's say you invested $10,000 in Apple. $10,000. Now, for some of us, that might be nothing. Like, oh, 10,000, nothing. I got it, right? And for some of us, that might be a bit of a stretch, right? For some of us, we might be thinking 10,000 in one company. How am I going to do that? How would I afford that? Well, we all got bonuses, right? Some of us get bonuses. You could put a chunk of your bonus into investing in Apple, right? Or you could actually be intentional and save for, a year or two by putting in even $200, $500 a month, just saving it and tucking it away. A lot of us also get tax returns. A lot of people get tax returns. Imagine if you actually used that money to invest, right? And so some people at the time could have invested $20,000. Some could have invested $1,000. I'm just going to go with the middle round of $10,000. Let's say we invested $10,000 10 years ago. And then guess what? We added an additional $200 every month to the same company, to Apple. $200. Really not make or break money. It's not going to make you, but it's not going to break you either. So you could invest it and see what happens. Now, I want you to think about this. Yes, it's a stretch, but this is the power of investing and compound investing. It's going to take you about 2 minutes to process a trade. Probably, you can go on your computer, on your phone. You're going to say, hey, I want to trade Apple. And then it's going to process the trade. And every single month, you're going to put in $200, the same trade. So maybe we're looking at about 10 minutes of work every month at the most, right? Sometimes it's going to go even quicker. So for 10 minutes a month, and not even, it's probably going to be 5 after the first investment. So for 5 minutes a month, over 10 years, so just from the last 10 years, and you're just doing it every single month with that one investment, guess how much it's going to be worth today? It's going to be worth $155 as the time of this recording. And so it's actually been worth much more than that. But right now we're currently going through a little something. And so guess what? $155,784 for less than 5 minutes of your time a month. It went from $10,000 to $155,000. Now you might be thinking, how does that even relate to me? Well, $155,000, if you're thinking about putting your kids through college, guess what? That could have been their college career, right? $155,000, let's say realistically speaking, you could probably take off a year or two from work and travel the world, or take care of a loved one, or go write a book that you've always wanted to write, right? Just from living off of your investment. I want you to take a moment and think about, what could I have realistically done with $155,000? How many of us wanted to invest in property for years, but we kept putting it off because we didn't have as much for the down payment? Even if you wanted to invest in, say, 3 or 4 properties, $155,000 could get you there with down payments. You could probably own at least 3 or 4 properties with that. So these are some things that I want you to start thinking about in terms of, what can my money do for me when I actually block out time to start making it work for me? Now, I don't want you to think that every company you invest in is going to have this miraculous story. There are companies that have done worse, and there are many companies that have done so much better than Apple. And so I want you to think about, what's a company that you could have invested in, say 10 years ago, and seeing realistically, where is it today? And so I'm going to put it in the show notes, a resource for you to click on to see what it would be worth in the real world today. So you might be thinking, okay, is it really that simple? What happened? How did Apple make this much money over time? I mean, really and truly, when you break it down, it's about a 30% return on average. Now, I said something that might have made you feel weird and icky just now. I said percent. And it's okay if it does. Like I said, at the end of this conversation, you're going to love percentages. And so the way I think about percentages is in terms of a raise, right? So a lot of us have had 9-to-5 jobs. A lot of us still have 9-to-5 jobs. But in the purest sense, I think, when I think about a bank account interest, I never really quite got it. Growing up, I thought, okay, the most interest I got in my bank account was enough to get me a pedicure or, a nice dinner back in the day. So I really didn't care about that interest rate. However, when someone said, hey, if your boss gives you a 10% raise, would you love that? If your boss gave you a 20% raise, would you love that? If your boss gave you a 30 or 40% raise, would you love that? That's how I want you to think about your return with your investments, right? So Apple gave you a 30% raise every single year. And so let's say you're making $100,000. They give you a 30% raise. Now you're making $130,000. Then they're giving you another 30% raise. And they're not giving you a 30% raise off that $100,000. The second year, they're giving you a 30% raise off of your $130,000. And that's how compounding works. That's how percentages work. So I want you to think about that. But what happened with Apple? The saga goes deep, and I'm not going to really get too deep into it. But Apple also pays dividends. So if you're thinking, well, I don't want to wait so long to cash out, well, you would be getting dividends, right? A percentage of the profits that Apple gets, they share with you. That's a dividend. And you'd be getting that every single quarter, right? 4 times a year, Apple's going to put money in your bank account for investing in Apple just to say thank you. That's kind of what goes into that big number there. There were also stock splits, right? And stock splits happen when you almost get a 2-for-1 deal, right? You purchase one stock and there's so much demand for it that the company can't just go and make more stock. They can't just say, hey, we're making more stock. They actually sometimes go out and split the stock that you have. So in your account, if you had 100 shares of Apple, you might go in the next day and there'll be 200 shares of Apple. So this doesn't happen often, but it does happen. And it's very beautiful and glorious when it does. Why did it also go up in time? Sometimes it has nothing to do with Apple. It could be the perceived value of Apple. People seeing that people are paying almost $1,000 for a phone when they used to pay like $200 or $300. That's the perceived value, which means that Apple is worth more now. So the stock price is worth more because people thinking that it's worth more, right? Similar to our currency. And so what I really want you to get to kind of bring all of this home is that time is money. What are the things you said you wanted to do 10 years ago that you still have not taken action on? What are the companies that you could have invested 10 years ago that could be helping you live your life and fuel your dreams? It's something that's really worth a thought, a serious thought, because your life, I'm certain, would look different if just 10 or 20 years ago you did what you said you wanted to do. So, can I get the commitment from you that you're going to do something? Whether it's investing in the stock market, saving more, taking a luxurious trip, or even just telling the people that you love them more, swimming, whatever that looks like, what can you do today that you said you wanted to do 10 years ago? And I'm going to leave you with the actual number that my dad had in mind when he said, hey, if we invested in one stock a year from the day you were born. So if we invested in one stock a year from the day I was born, and it is today where I still kept up the habit, I can't even say this number with a straight face because I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. It is worth $228,229,820. I will say that number again because it just makes me giddy at the thought, like, are you kidding me? Like, we could have done that. And so when I hear this number and I see it, I'm like, dude, we got to start investing in Apple every single month again, because since then I've started investing in other things. But when I ran this number again, 208 million, y'all, million. And so that's just an additional 20 plus years from the original 10. But imagine where you're going to be in just 20 or 30 years from now, right? It's not going to be that long away. Imagine if you have kids, how fast they grow up. If you have grandkids, how fast they're growing up. If you've got nieces or nephews or people around you, right? It flies by. So I'm going to say that number again. $208,229,820 is what just a portion of what our wealth would be if we invested in Apple from the day I was born. $10,000 original investment, same as before. And for this one, I didn't even say $100 a month because I remember growing up, we weren't like super duper wealthy. And also $100 a month back then was so much more than it is now. So I thought, what if we did $500 a year? So this is actually about 50% less monthly contribution. But still, 208 million, that is life-changing, generation-shifting wealth, you know? And with that said, heck yeah, my life will look different with $208 million, right? Heck yes. And so I want to say that, hey, your life will look different the more you do this, the more you figure it out. So with that said, I hope you enjoyed today's show. I hope you got some nuggets from it, and I can't wait to hear what you think. Please feel free to leave us a review or drop comments in the chat. It doesn't really matter. I just want to know if this is helpful for you all, and what are your ahas as a result of listening to the Happy Investor Method show. You can always find more information about me at thehappyinvestormethod.com. or angelaematthews.com. Talk to you soon.